tutorial starts with a song, but it's only a few seconds long. Let's get started with animation. Hello friends, today we'll not talk about constraints, not about parent point orient constraints, but we'll talk about something which is sort of related. It is the edit parent command with a sweet shortcut P. Let's go to the side window and just give you a brief demonstration of this. Let's type in, actually we go to the front window for this purpose, and I just use the number 3, and I animate the number 3 from going from the left side, and I press the key S, so set a keyframe here, to the right side and a little bit down, and I rotate it like this quite dramatically, move it even further here and scale it down. The keyframe is automatically set because I have auto key on. The animation goes like this. Very simple, very straightforward. And now I create a second object, for example, a NURBS cone, which sits in the center of the scene. And now with the cone selected, I in addition select the 3, the mesh. So first the cone, then the 3, and then I press P, parent. Nothing in the scene seems to have changed, but in the outliner you see a change because the cone is not there anymore because it's under the hood of the type mesh. So when we run the animation now, we see interesting things happening. The cone always follows the 3. It rotates like the 3, it scales like the 3, and it keeps the position as the 3 does. That's parenting. The difference between parenting and constraint is, one of the differences is that you can actually move this object here. You can, for example, say at the very beginning, I want it to be here, and set a keyframe for the cone only. Go to the end and move it over here. And now the animation looks like this. It still scales and rotates like the 3, and it's under the hood of the 3, but it has a life of its own. Now we create a new scene, and in this new scene we go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and in this long menu we go to Settings, which is right in the middle. We want to have not centimeters as the working units, we want to have meters because we're dealing with a character. I save this, the window closes, and when I press A, which means all, look at everything, it doesn't look different, but this is 1 meter now rather than 1 centimeter. Next thing, I import a motion capture file. Windows, Content Browser. If you don't find it right here, it's under General Editors, which in previous versions of Maya, in the versions until 2021, I think, it was sitting under General Editors. Now it's open here in the Content Browser. And if you don't find it ad hoc, go to Help and search and type in Content, and you will be led to the proper position of this menu, Content Browser. In the Content Browser you find under Animation, Motion Capture, FBX. That's the, well, variety of, it's quite a small variety of motion capture data which you can use for practicing. And well, which one shall we pick? A walk and turn, for example. When we double click it, it lands in the scene, and you see why we did that change of dimensions, because now we have not a very huge character, but a character which is nicely positioned in the scene. We don't want to skin him or her, we just want to do some parenting. Why is that? Well, for example, here, let us just go to one of the positions of our motion capture. We now introduce a curve. We want to visualize this because even if you introduce a light like the sky dome light and you render it, you don't see anything because the joints cannot be rendered. So let's delete that light again. Now we create curves and we'll render the curves, and the curves will stick to our skeleton, to the joints, in order to make the joints visible, sort of. By the way, the joints are very thin. Where do you change this? Under settings and preferences, and it has to do with the kinematics, which is right here. Display, it's a display thing, it's not a crucial rendering or whatever thing, it's under kinematics. And here you see the joint size. When you scale this up, the joints become bigger, like this, which is quite good for us. Now we double click this icon. Why double click? Because the standard curve degree is 3, it's cubic. And we want to have it linear because NURBS degree, which is the 3 degree of the curve, makes round curves, and we want to have linear curves, straightforward curves. That's why we click on one and create linear curves. Now I will only start with it, and you will have to finish this. I snap the first point of that curve to, for example, this joint, and snapping goes with the key V. With the key V, it toggles this icon here, this magnet icon, and when I get close to this joint root here, I place the first point of my curve. And I do the same here with snapping to the next one. And I press enter. Now I have a tiny curve here, and the curve is, of course, we're at frame 47 in this case. The curve sits there. It does not move with our skeleton because we didn't, well, parent it to the skeleton. So here in the outliner you see, this is a huge menu, by the way. When we shift open it, we see all the joints. Shift close it, but the curve is extra. This is the curve which we just created. And when you now, in addition to the curve, select that joint, which actually selects the whole hierarchy underneath that joint, doesn't matter really, and press P, the curve disappears and it is down there. And so it's in that group. Now, when you move the time slider, you see that the curve follows nicely. How do you render the curve? Well, the curve is selected, and if you don't have it selected, you can, for example, just deselect it, go to select, and select all by type, all NURBS curves, and then the curve is selected. And here you have an Arnold section. Let me open it, close it here, and here you can set the render curve node to active. And the curve width, just crank it up a little bit like this. And now you introduce a light, like the sky dome light. I like to make the light invisible for in the viewport, so I don't inadvertently pick it. And now I render this, and I see that curve. When you do this with all other joints, you get a perfectly animated skeleton. Let me just do it with one or two more. So I click on the curve tool and I snap to the shoulder and I snap here, and actually I render that curve again, make rendering active. And now in addition, I pick this joint and press P. Now the shoulder moves and the curve follows. One more. I select this one, and with the snapping, this one, press enter, render that curve, scale it up, and shift, select it, press P. Sounds complicated if you're not used to it, but now when you render it, you get 3 curves. They're all differently thick because I just more or less randomly cranked this value up. An interesting thing, by the way, is this. I did a tutorial about this menu, Arnold Curve Collector. The Curve Collector collects all the curves, so you don't have to tick on render curve for each curve, which is quite elegant, especially if you have more than, say, 5 or 10 curves. You can collectively render them here, but they don't respect the motion, the parenting. Let me show you that. I select all by type, and I select the NURBS curves, and now I go to Arnold and the Curve Collector. And once I've done that, you see all the menu entries here. Ribbon, you can choose the width for all of them, which is quite nice, but now they stay in place. So this command is very useful, but not in our context. Well, one more thing I want to show you. Let us undo this. So undo the command Curve Collector, so the curves follow that object. What you can do now, lots of things actually. You go, for example, to FX, to the special effects, and create N particles emitted from that object. Emit from object, that is the curves. And the curves, of course, have a center, and that's where the particles will be emitted. You see at the center, and now they're already visible here because our character is moving all the way to the front. And they fall to the ground because of the nucleus. And they look like this because in the particle shape we would have to change something about the shading. Rather than points, we want spheres. And now we can change the particle size to this, for example. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.